Welcome to Chat with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and we're honored to have a celebrity in the house, State's Attorney Angela Alsobrooks in Prince George's County.
Well, thank you so much. No celebrities, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, it's welcome. And tell us how, before you became a state's attorney, what did you do?
You know, I started as an assistant state's attorney in 1997. Okay. So my first job after my clerkship was actually as the first full-time domestic violence attorney ever to work in the state's attorney's office, and that was in May of 1997. Went on to work in the government for a while. Ended up at a place called the Revenue Authority, which is really the parking authority, as executive director, and then ran for office in 2010, and that's how I came back to the state's attorney's office.
Wow, and domestic violence being such a key issue in Prince George's County, especially at maybe like 4 to 6 years ago.
It's amazing that unfortunately things haven't changed a whole lot, which is why we really have to focus there and make sure that we don't take the next generation into the same sorts of homes, and we don't continue this whole epidemic in the future.
Interesting. Well, that segues into sort of the first thing I want to talk about. What are the initiatives that you as a state's attorney is focused on, especially since you've had 4 years already and now just recently reelected? So tell us some of the main initiatives you have.
So a few of the main initiatives really revolve around families. Some of it is protecting and investing in children. And as a part of that, domestic violence tends to be a huge issue that really impacts families. Last year, for example, we had 54 homicides altogether. 19 of those homicides were domestic in nature, which was astonishing to us. So we're working with the faith-based community in a partnership led by Pastor John Jenkins and also Pastor Macklin have been wonderful in helping to coordinate the effort. And we're going to train members of the faith community on March 9th. We're doing a county-wide training for anyone in the faith community who's interested in taking part of it. We want to make sure that people who come to their churches and faith communities for information will have uniform, consistent, and accurate information to help them and help their families. So that's one of the big efforts we're working on, is really reducing domestic violence and eliminating it altogether in our community. One of the other initiatives we've worked on has to do with children.
Now, just want to piggyback, the March 9th event, where would that be?
That's at First Baptist Church of Glenarden. Yes, it starts at 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And that's going to be, it lasts, I believe, until 3 o'clock, but it should be phenomenal training. Absolutely excellent training that we've put together. We're also going to have a number of resource vendors who will be present, who can share information with members of the faith community, how to navigate protective orders, how to navigate the court system, what about housing, what about mental health. All of those topics will be covered during that training.
Nice, okay.
So it'd be really, really important. And you know, it's so important. We had, out of the 19 last year, 7 babies who were killed in Prince George's County, 3 and under. 3 and under by their parents and caretakers. So when we talk about domestic violence, we're not talking just about intimate violence. We see a good number of parents killing children. We see children killing parents. So this is an issue that has really engulfed our community and really needs to change.
Wow, wow. Well, so can you talk about this? It's such a shocking news.
It is shocking, and you know what? And it should be shocking to us. It should be impossible for a child in our community to be killed in that way. But what we find is that children are the invisible victims of domestic violence, and that violence tends to impact them as they go along in their lives. So one of the other areas that we've worked on, we've hosted 2 summits as well. One was a Sisterhood Summit that we hosted in 2011, and that was for girls 13 to 18 years old. And we did that after the Bowie State killing. You probably saw the one roommate.
Can you talk a little bit about that Bowie State killing?
So there was one young lady who stabbed and killed her roommate. There was some sort of dispute between the 2 women. One of the roommates went to get a knife, and she stabbed stabbed in the neck her roommate and killed her. And what that really did for us is to highlight the fact that none of us is immune from violence. Here you have 2 college women who were both really excellent students. They were very promising, and we thought if this can happen to our college-aged and college-attending students, it can happen to anyone. And so we hosted the Sisterhood Summit, where we brought resources to the women. We had over 500 of them come out and attend it. to talk about teen dating violence, to talk about self-esteem, to talk about all the things we thought could help women stay out of the criminal justice system, young women, who we find are the fastest growing prison population in Prince George's County, and our DOC is female. Is female.
And what do you think are the contributing factors?
I think domestic violence has a lot to do with it. I think a lot of women become dependent on drugs at some point, sexual violence. So we have a lot of sexual assault. 1 in 4 women, 1 out of every 4 women will be sexually assaulted before their 18th birthday. That's another astonishing number. And many of these women who have never healed from it turn to drugs. And those drug dependencies, we think, really increase the likelihood that they will be involved in criminal activity. And we start seeing them involved in the criminal justice system. And so that's one of the fastest growing populations we've found. I think domestic violence has a lot to do with it as well. But we're seeing those numbers, and we're trying to do what we can, not only to combat violence, which is what I think we've done exceptionally well over the last 4 years. We've worked the police. We have an excellent police chief. We have a wonderful sheriff. We've worked exceptionally well with this county executive, who's been phenomenal. And we've just worked throughout the government, and we've seen a 40% overall decline in homicides over the last 4 years.
Right, and this has been national, right?
Well, this has been in Prince George's County, but those numbers are not, you don't see those matched anywhere else nationally. It's a very big number. So we work to decrease crime, but we're also working to prevent it. Right. And so we find that it's not good enough just to react to crime, but we're trying to do a much better job of being proactive and putting things in place to ensure that the violence never happens in the first place.
Now, are you looking into parenting or anything, any sort of thing? And that's a touchy subject. Some people don't like to be told.
Well, you know what? We have done some. So, for example, we had, I said the Sisterhood Summit. We also had the Brotherhood Summit. And we hosted that summit at Bowie State University. And during the course of that summit, where we also had speakers, motivational speakers, we had the mentoring organizations, we had a parenting seminar happening simultaneously. And so we believe, as we support the young men and young women, we also have to support their parents. Sometimes parent means grandparent, because we find that about 40% of our young people in our public school systems are now being raised by grandparents. So this is another generational shift that we are seeing. And so supporting parents and families becomes extremely important. We are hosting, along with the First Baptist Church of Glenarden and a number of those pastors that we told you about, a family summit. Interesting. So that's the next big conference that we are hosting. We had a tentative date of this spring. We think we're probably going to move it into the fall, but we'll be doing the things you're talking about. How do we reach parents? How do we support parents? How do we talk about mental health and what that has meant for our community? How do we remove the shame from asking for help and saying that we need help? How do we address domestic violence in the way that not only talks to women, but talks to men? That's a whole different approach we have to have, is how do we also talk to men about some of these issues that we're seeing in a way that is, again, not shaming or blaming, but really gets to the root of the issue so that we can resolve it.
Interesting. So is there any other initiatives that you might have?
Yes. Well, one of the other initiatives that we're really proud of is we've been working in truancy. We have a number of high schools in Prince George's County with truancy rates between 10 and 15%. There was, at one point, one school that had a 19% truancy rate. And so what we've done is selected a number of schools to work to reduce truancy. There is an assistant state's attorney in my office. Her name is Christina Jones. And Christina came to me with an idea for a program called I Belong Here. I Belong Here works with 6th and 7th graders, and we now have 3 schools in our pilot program. William Worth, we have Andrew Jackson Middle School, and Samuel Massey. And we cause the students to compete, classrooms to compete for attendance, and they are rewarded.
That's the way to do it.
That's the way to do it, right? 6th and 7th graders, and they're rewarded with, they have dinners, they have gift certificates, they have sporting goods, tickets to games, and the results have been phenomenal. We have, in some instances, 98% attendance. This attendance has changed drastically as a result of this pilot program, and so we're working to reduce truancy by incentivizing and showing the connection between school attendance and performance. And so our assistant state's attorneys go there. I was at one of the schools about a week ago to do a pep rally to acknowledge the students who have done exceptionally well. And so truancy is a huge initiative for us because we know that students who are not in school, if they drop out of school, their chances of becoming involved in the criminal justice system multiply exponentially.
Right. Now, there's always this discussion of sort of criminalizing, getting people starting in the criminal justice system so early. So if students are not going to school, are they arrested? And if they're arrested, they come to your office. Do you always carry it forward, or how do you deal with those?
No, actually what we're doing is we're taking an opposite stance. We're now taking a positive approach to it and rewarding the students who come, and we find that positive peer pressure works. Okay. And so one class competes with the other and says, you know what, we're going to have we're going to get a special meal because of our attendance. And so we don't want to criminalize not coming to school because ultimately it's the parents' responsibility to get their child to school. And what we also find is very often when there's a family who doesn't send a child to school, especially in elementary and middle school, we learn that there's a problem in that family. So what we want to do is have the opportunity to help a family. So that if we find that there's a third or fourth grader who's not coming to school, we invite in those parents. What we have done is we've sent out letters and saying, you know what, it's important to go to school. And when they don't send them, we invite in those parents, sit down along with the government and say, is there something we can assist you with? Is there a problem in terms of clothing? Very often that's the case. Maybe a parent didn't have a caregiver for younger children and they kept the child at home. So when we find that there's truancy, especially in the lower grades, it's an opportunity for us, not to punish people, but an opportunity to intervene and assist the family, because ultimately the only goal is getting that child back to school. Right. That's the goal, not to send parents to jail, not to send the child to jail. Right. The ultimate goal is to have the child attend school.
Interesting. And speaking of intervention now, I know there's a lot of work in domestic violence, women being protected from their spouse. I mean, of course, most of the victims in domestic violence are women. So how does the state's attorney go around protecting women that do come to you for help?
So we have excellent advocates. We have a really great domestic violence team. And what we do is we have advocates who actually sit with the women, who give them advice and help about navigating the system. We actually have assistant state's attorneys who counsel women. I had one lawyer who spent time on the phone every evening up to trial, just encouraging her victim in the case who was very frightened to come to court. So they provide a good amount of not only professional advice and help, but also personal support. Right. And so we do quite a bit of that sort of support too for women who are victims of domestic violence. Yes.
Well, we are going to take a short break and come back. This has been really interesting information, so please stay with us.
This is Ban Bossy. Take one.
Pushy. Stubborn. Stubborn. Pushy.
Pushy.
Stubborn. Stubborn. Bossy. 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 Bossy.
When I was growing up, I was called bossy.
I think the word bossy is just a squasher.
Being labeled something matters. By middle school,
girls are less interested in leadership than boys.
And that's because they worry about being called bossy.
We need to tell them it's okay to be ambitious.
We need to help them lean in.
Words matter.
Let's just ban the word bossy.
And encourage girls to lead.
To be strong and be ambitious.
Listen to your own voice. There are no limits.
Dare to be you.
You can change the world.
Let's ban bossy.
Be brave. Be you.
Ban bossy.
Join us to ban bossy.
I'm not bossy. I'm the boss.
Encourage girls to lead. Take the pledge at banbossy.com.
Welcome back to Chat with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and I was talking with the state's attorney, Angela Alsobrooks, about some of the initiatives that she has in her office for the next 4 years.
Exactly.
So let's get into financial crimes. What do you have into?
So unfortunately, because of the foreclosure crisis, we have seen a good number of crimes where people take advantage of families who are going through foreclosure. We had two cases in particular recently. Shannon Lee, the case of Shannon Lee, a young woman who decided that she would break into houses, photograph these houses. She listed it on Craigslist, and when people responded to her Craigslist ad, she rented the properties to them. She forged documents to reflect that she was the owner of the document. She filed these fraudulent deeds. and collected rent until finally a woman, it was unfortunate for her, it was a woman who actually worked for the police department, was one of the victims who came back to visit her home periodically and noticed somebody was living there. She went and knocked on the door. The family came to the door and said, "We live here." And she said, "What do you mean you live here? You know, this is my house." And came in contact at some point with Shannon Lee, who said that, no, I'm the rightful owner of this house. She was prosecuted, Shannon Lee was, investigated, prosecuted, and she served 6 months in jail for burglary, second-degree burglary. Along with Shannon Lee was a friend of hers, Kiana Johnson, who also was convicted of her crime, and she, sort of like Shannon Lee, decided that she saw an opportunity. She actually moved herself and her family into one of these foreclosed homes that she didn't own. The rightful owners of the home were in California, had gone out to pursue another job opportunity, and their home was at risk of foreclosure. And Kiana Johnson moved in. When the rightful owners realized she was in the home, they filed to have her evicted, and she filed a civil suit against the owners of this home, had them flying back and forth from California to defend this frivolous lawsuit that they filed against her. And so we prosecuted her as well. She was convicted, and she is awaiting sentencing. Oh, wow. So these are some of the examples of what we're seeing in terms of the foreclosure crisis. But in addition to people who are actually profiting from it, we also see a good number of people who have been storing the goods of other crimes in these vacant homes. So vacant properties have been a real problem for us. People who have, for example, burglarized homes in an area, they take the proceeds of those burglaries and they store them in these foreclosed and vacant homes. So we're finding that the vacant homes are causing a lot of problems in communities, not only storing the proceeds of these crimes, but of course the overgrown lawns and everything are unsightly. And so we've been working really to make sure that we can address those issues. We're part of a task force that was recently formed to deal with these foreclosures, and we want people to know that if you have a home in your neighborhood that you suspect is having this kind of activity, that you should give us a call, give us an opportunity to look into it. Frank Cubero is the lawyer on our staff who is dealing with these many of these homes, and his number is 301-952-3021. Okay. And again, that's Frank Cubero. But that's some of what we're seeing, not only the houses, but a good number of seniors who have been taken advantage of as well. We have an elder abuse unit. It's the only elder abuse unit in the state.
Can you tell us about the elder abuse
unit? Elders, we have, and it acts a little like domestic violence in that these elders are ashamed very often, and of course they are primarily victimized by people they know and trust, family members. And these crimes some are physical abuse, but we see a good number as well of financial crimes that happen with seniors.
Which is very prevalent now.
Absolutely. So we've prosecuted a number of children of these victims who have used their accounts to write checks and to take money from them. We have also seen a few scams where we had people calling, for example, saying, you know what, this is the sheriff's department, and I'm calling you because you missed jury duty. And in order for you to make amends for this, go get a debit card. Call me at this number and give me the numbers on this prepaid card that you buy. And then, of course, this is a call, they call back and they give the numbers for the debit card. And we find that, of course, it's hard to trace. But taking money from seniors that way for jury duty, there's a clearinghouse. They always publish a clearinghouse scams, the same thing. You've won $1 million, but in order for you to claim it, you call me back, you give me a gift card number over the phone, and I will release the information to you about your millions. So a good number of seniors have been victimized using some of those scams, and we've been really working hard to get the information out to seniors about it through our elder abuse unit. And we have an elder abuse day, actually, where we have vendors out who educate our seniors about lots of different things, including these crimes, so that they can keep themselves safe.
Interesting. What advice do you have for individuals that are becoming victims of these financial crimes?
I say to be very guarded about any individual who calls you to ask for your personal information over the phone. And if you have a question about it, do not give that information. Contact my office, contact the sheriff's department to find out whether or not this is in fact a legitimate inquiry, but be very guarded in terms of giving information over the phone. And if you ever feel uncomfortable, they should just call us, even with a relative. We understand the sensitivity there as well, but if you feel that something may be going on, it's really advisable to give us a call. And again, that's our elder abuse unit. They can call Frank Cubero, Doyle Neiman in our office, and we'd be happy to assist.
Interesting. Well, let's go in. This is the time of legislative session is in 2015.
It is.
And so what are some of the initiatives that you're supporting this session?
So this session there are a couple of bills that we testified on recently, and we're going to testify again on the House side. One is Senate Bill 82, and Senate Bill 82 has to do with increasing the penalty for second-degree murder from 30 years to 40 years. This becomes extremely important to us because Maryland is only one of 10 states. So 40 of the 50 states allow greater than 30 years for second-degree murder, but not Maryland. So Maryland has one of the lowest penalties in the state. And where this becomes important is generally in domestic violence cases. So we had the case, for example, of Mr. Nathan, a guy who stabbed his girlfriend 90 times. His pregnant girlfriend stabbed her, brutally murdered her. But of course, because the jury could not be convinced that there was any premeditation, but in fact this seemed to them to be more heat of passion sort of killing, he was sentenced to 30 years.
What did she do to?
Well, there was an argument, and following this argument, he stabbed her 90 times, I believe over 40 in the face, and killed this young woman. But what that means is when you're sentenced to 30 years for violent crimes, you generally serve half of your sentence. That means a person who brutalized a person by stabbing them over 90 times is eligible in 15 years to walk among us again. We find that that is not enough time. But we've had many of these domestic cases. We had a case where a man killed his mother-in-law in a similar fashion, stabbed her over 50 times. And again, 30-year sentence means in 15, you're eligible to be out with us again. So we are really hoping that we can have this legislation passed, which would at least give us the 40 years and give us more time. That's one of the bills that we're supporting. And then there's another Senate Bill 67, which would make a home invasion a crime of violence in the statute, the criminal law statute. And what that means is if it is considered a crime of violence, a home invasion, burglary, it means that you would be eligible for enhanced penalties. There are certain enhanced penalties that come along with having your crime characterized as a crime of violence, including having a mandatory minimum sentence for using a handgun in the commission of a crime of violence, so that if you have a gun, then that's additional time that we can request. Committing an act of violence in the presence of a child, for example, allows a judge.
Wasn't this something that you supported before?
That's one of the bills that we supported last year that we testified, and thank goodness was passed, which gives a judge the ability to add an additional 5 years consecutive to a sentence of a person who commits an act of violence in the presence of a child. Very important, because a lot of these domestic violence cases occur in the presence of small children.
Now, is there a fine line to draw? Because, there are in some cultures and communities, people believe in corporal punishment for children, and is that considered violence? Is
assault a crime of violence?
No, like a corporal, just like
spanking a
child or something like that. Would someone get in trouble for that?
You know what? I think that it depends on the facts of the case, the severity of the case, as to whether or not the person would be charged with either child abuse or charged with assault. I think it happens on a case-by-case basis, but there are individuals who have been charged depending on whether the child is injured. Those are some of the factors that we would consider.
Okay.
So those are some of the factors. But in the case of the crime of violence in the presence of a child, that's more, we've had a number of cases where you've killed your spouse in the presence of your 5-year-old or your 4-year-old, or I stabbed mommy in the presence of my 4-year-old. We've had a good number of those cases where the children are on 911 saying, oh my God, I'm looking now, Daddy, my mother's on the floor. and there's a lot of blood, and so that's what we're talking about in the presence of a minor.
I see. Okay, so it has to be extreme, sort of a step, and is the wording of the statute just sort of the bill allows for just violence in general, or just
domestic violence?
Domestic violence.
It's just domestic violence.
I see.
And thank you for pointing that out. That is an important distinction. So not all violence, but domestic violence in the presence of a child.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes. So that's the kind of violence we are talking about.
Okay. Well, and is there any other bills you're supporting for this?
So those are a couple that we are supporting. We had such a great legislative session, to be honest with you, last year, and we're already seeing some of those bills used.
Like what are
For
the
example,
bills?
threat of mass violence is a bill that we actually wrote and put in last year to make it against the law to make a threat of mass violence. That was not before then a crime in Maryland.
What is mass violence? Like it defines
So
mass
if I say,
violence.
for example, I call this building and say, you know what, I'm coming over and I'm going to shoot and kill everybody I see.
And that wasn't a crime
And that
before?
was not a crime in Maryland.
Wow.
That was not a crime in Maryland. So we had a couple of instances. For example, the University of Maryland, we had a young man who went on a chat room and said, anybody who's on campus tomorrow at whatever time, he said 2 o'clock, is not going to be a good thing. I'm going to kill people up on campus tomorrow. And the only thing we could charge him with was disturbing school activities. Turns out that was not a crime. We had a man who called into his place of business and said he was going to splatter brains and he was going to do all kind of stuff. And that was it's not a crime. A guy who called into Baltimore to the Under Armour and made a similar threat, said that he was going to come and kill his coworkers. And when the police went to arrest him, he said, what are you bothering me for? He said that terroristic threats are not a crime in Maryland.
He already knew the
That's
law.
literally what he said. Terroristic threats are not a crime in Maryland. I don't know why you are interrupting me. So now we made sure that if he made a similar threat, we would be interrupting him for good reason.
Right.
We can now go over and
got the
arrest
law in
him.
place.
And that law has actually already been used. There was a man, I believe recently, who called into the Capitol to communicate a threat, and we were being able to use the call from Maryland, and we're going to use this legislation to prosecute those. Yes. So, yeah, so we were, very active then. This year we're still in Annapolis. Most of the crimes that we're supporting this year are enhanced penalties. We're also working on a Back on Track program, which is really, we're excited about. This program works with first-time nonviolent drug dealers. And we have worked with the community college to establish training areas where they can earn certifications. The person, in order to work in the program, has to plead guilty and serve 220 hours of community service before they're even accepted. We will defer their sentence for up to a year. And if they are successful in our program, we'll come in, we'll withdraw their guilty, take it off their record for one time only. They leave with a job, with a certification, with a GED or equivalent, and all in the help. We give them also a personal responsibility plan during the course of their time with us, and so they're back on track.
Interesting.
And that's for young people.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our show. This has been good. We're going to have you come later to tell us the updates of a lot of the programs that you have.
Yes.
And if anybody wants to contact your office, let them know how to contact you.
Okay, so if they want to contact our office, we are at 301-952-3500, and that's the state's attorney's office, and we'd be happy to hear from them.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much again for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want more information on the videos, you can contact us at chatwiththelawyer@gmail.com, or you can go to our website at www.wallablagay.com. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for next time.